Good morning, dear students. This is part 5 of chapter 9. The chapter is Heredity and Evolution. Okay, so let me show you what we are going to discuss today in this part. We'll discuss three topics, and those topics are evolution and classification. This is the first topic that we will discuss in this part, and then tracing evolutionary relationships, and then the last topic will be fossils. Okay, so let me start with the first one, that is evolution and classification. Evolution and classification. This is our first topic of today's lecture. Classification enables us to explore the evolutionary origin of an organism, right? Two organisms in the same genus, they are generally very similar and are therefore likely to share an ancestor in the recent past. For example, see, the genus Canis includes dogs, jackals, and wolves. They all are similar to each other. In the same manner, two organisms in the same kingdom, ठीक है, for example dogs and spider, they both belongs to same kingdom. Okay, they share some characteristics but are different in many ways. Consequently, their common ancestors is likely to be the distant past. So whether the animals will be having the same ancestors or not depends on which group they are kept. Okay. Okay, similarities among organisms will allow us to group them and then study those groups. Okay, for this, which characteristics decide more fundamental differences among the organisms and which one decides less basic differences? If it is clear to us, it will be very easy to keep the organisms in a group or in different groups. But the question is, what is characteristics? Let me answer this question. Characteristics are details of appearance or behavior. Okay. Or in other words, we can say a particular form or a particular function of the organism is known as characteristics. So on the basis of their characteristics, they can be grouped together. See, for example, we have four limbs. So this is our characteristics. Plants do photosynthesis. So this is the characteristics of plants. On the basis of this, plants can be grouped together, and on the basis of the number of limbs and appendages, animals can be grouped together. Okay. Some basic characteristics will help to put the organisms into group. Okay, and these characteristics will be shared by most organisms of that group. See, for example, the cell is the basic unit of the life in all the organisms, right? The characteristics in the next level of the classification would be shared by most, but not by all the organisms. A basic characteristic of cell design that differs among different organisms is whether the cell has a nucleus or not. So that characteristic will be the next level to organize the animals or living organisms into group. Okay, see, bacterial cells do not have nucleus, while the cells of most other organisms, they do have the nucleus. So that is also a criteria of classification. The organisms in which cell have nucleus can be grouped together, and the organisms in which the cells do not have nucleus can be grouped together. Okay. So among the organism with nucleated cells, which one are unicellular and which one are multicellular? This is the further classification. So the property marks a very basic difference in the body design because of specialization of cell types and the tissues. Among multicellular organisms, whether they can undertake photosynthesis or not, that will provide the next level of classification. Okay, see what we are doing. We are just classifying. At first, we divided into two parts, whether they are having cells or not. Okay, having cells or not. And if sorry, cells, so all the organism will be having cell. So the cell is having nucleus or not. So when they are having nucleus, the unicellular, multicellular. So multicellular may be on the type of tissues and cells, type of tissues and type of cells. Okay, and then whether they perform photosynthesis or not. So if they perform photosynthesis, the, whether they are having complex tissues or not. So this way classification is done further. Okay, so now let me clear all these things. Fine. Among the multicellular organisms that cannot do photosynthesis, whether the skeleton is inside the body or around the body, that will mark another fundamental design differences. We can see that even in these few questions that we have asked over here in this slide, a hierarchy is developing that allow us to make classification groups. So how to classify? This was the clarification for that. On the basis of the characteristics, organisms can be classified into group. The more characteristics two species will have in common, the more closely they are related. And the more closely they are related, the more recently they will have had a common ancestor. Okay, here with example it can be explained clearly. Here an example of a brother and a sister is given. A brother and a sister, they are closely related. Fine, they have common ancestors in first generation. uh, we can name them the parent of the generation. Okay, here they are brother and sisters. Okay, and these are the parent, so they are very close related. Now a girl and her first cousin are also related. This is girl and this is first cousin. Any one from these two children we can take, see. Okay, but less than the girl and her brother. Did you get it? Okay, let me explain with the help of this picture. This is one couple, husband and wife. Okay, and they have two sons. This is the first son and this is the second son. This is the family of this son and this family belongs to the another son. Okay, now the first son has two children, one boy and one girl. Second son also have two children, one boy and one girl. Okay, so this is family 1 and this one family 2. Both the families are related to each other. But now these brother and sisters, they are closely related. These brother and sisters are also closely related to each other. And comparatively, these cousin sisters are related but not as close as these two are. Okay, this is because cousins have common ancestors, their grandparents, in the second generation before them, not in the first one. Okay, so this first one generation is more close to each other in the comparison of this second generation. Fine. So now we can appreciate the classification of species in the fact a reflection of their evolutionary relationship. Okay. We can now thus build up small groups of species with recent common ancestors. Then supergroups of these groups with more distant common ancestors and so on, so on and so on. And then we will be having a hierarchy. In theory, we can keep going backwards like this until we come to the notion of a single species at the very beginning of evolutionary time. Okay, if that is the case, then at some point in the history of the earth, non-living material must have given rise to life. It may be. There are many theories about how this might have happened. It would be very interesting to come up with the theories of our own, whether we all have one common ancestors or not. Tracing evolutionary relationship. A How do we identify characteristics as common? When we try to follow evolutionary relationships. These characteristics in different organisms would be similar because they are inherited from a common ancestor. For example, we can say that, see, consider the fact that mammals have four limbs, as do birds have, reptiles also have, and amphibians also have. Okay, in this figure, you can see these are the limbs of frog, lizard, bird, and human. They have limbs, four limbs. Okay, the basic structure of the limbs is similar, though it has been modified to perform different functions in various vertebrates. These type of animals or living organisms, they are homologous to each other. Okay, and this characteristic help us to identify an evolutionary relationship between apparently different species. However, all similarities simply in organ shape are not necessarily because of common ancestry. See, have you ever thought about the wings of bird and bats? Here are the wings of a bat and the birds. Okay, birds and bats, they both have wings, means their body organ is there, that is same. The bat is also having wing and bird is also having wing. ठीक है? But squirrels and lizard do not have. Birds and bats are more closely to each other. Why? Because they both have wings. They are not that much close to squirrel and lizard. Okay. Before we jump to this conclusion, let us look at the wings of birds and bird more closely. We find that wings of bats are skin folds stretchly, mainly between elongated fingers. Okay. While the wings of birds are feathery, covering all along the arm. Means the structure of wings of both bat and bird is different. The design of the wings of bats and bird is very different. They look similar because they have a common use for flying. Okay, but as the structure is different, their origin are not common, right? So this makes them analogous, and that is the analogous characteristics. And these types of organs are known as analogous organ. Okay. So let me define homologous organs and analogous organ for you. Homologous organs are similar in structure and they share a common origin but may be adapted to perform different functions. If the structure is same but functions of those organs are different, they are known as homologous organ. Here are the examples of homologous organs. Okay, come to the analogous organs. Analogous organs are the organs that have evolved separately but they look alike because they are adapted to perform same functions. Means the organs that perform same functions but the structure is different are known as analogous organ. Here are the examples of analogous organ. Now I come to the next topic, that is fossil. The studies of organ structure can be done not only on current species but also on the species that are no longer alive. How do we know that these extinct species ever existed? We know this from finding fossils. The question is, what are fossils? Okay, I'll discuss this with you. Usually when organisms die, their bodies will decompose and be lost. But every once in a while, the body, or at least some parts of the body, may be in the environment that doesn't let it decompose completely. If a dead insects get caught in hot mud, for example, it will not decompose quickly and the mud will eventually harden and retain that impression of the body parts of the insect. All such preserved traces of living organisms are called fossils. Here in the animation, you can see that the body part of this bird is caught in You can say in rock or hot mud, and after a long time it will be traced as fossil. How do we know how old the fossil are? See, to find out that how old the fossils are, there are two components to this estimation. The first one is relative. If we dig into the earth and start finding fossils, it is reasonable to suppose that the fossils we find closer to the surface are more recent than the fossils that we find in the deeper layers. Okay. And the second one is of dating fossils by detecting the ratios of different isotopes of the same element in the fossils materials. So by these two methods we can find out how old the fossils are. Here I have taken this picture from your textbook, and it shows how do fossils form layer by layer. I think you would like to read this. Let us start 100 million years ago. Some invertebrates on the seabed die. Okay, and they are buried in the sand. More sand accumulates and sandstone form under pressure. Millions of years later, dinosaurs living in the area die and their bodies too are buried in the mud. This mud is also compressed into rocks above the rocks containing the earlier invertebrates fossil. And see, the layers are forming day by day, years by years, and then decades by decades. Millions of years later, the bodies of horse-like creatures dying in the area, they are fossilized in rocks above these earlier rocks. Okay, one more layer is there. Much later, by erosion of water flows, wears away some of the rocks and exposes horse-like fossils. As we dig deeper, we will find older and older fossils. So this is the process of forming the fossils and then how fossils are exposed. Okay. This picture I have taken from net. According to the information, this is an ancient bird. It lived about 110 million years ago, and the place where it is found is now in China. And when the bird died, its body held an unlaid egg. Scientists have reached this conclusion that this bird had an unlaid egg inside it. Here, this is another animation of the bird, how it is caught by the rock, and later on, after millions years later, it is found as an fossil. This is another picture of fossil of a bird, and according to the scientists, this is a fossil of the oldest bird. Here I am having another picture for you. See, all these pictures I have taken from net. Okay. So, okay, students, this much was there for this session. Now we'll meet in part 6. Thank you.